The Corsair Void Pro headset features comfortable microfiber, mesh fabric, and memory foam ear cups, custom-tuned 50mm neodymium drivers with Dolby Headphone 7.1 surround support, and a unidirectional noise-canceling microphone with LED mute indicator. Available in RGB and wireless trim too, so click the link in the description for more information.
Excellent!
Welcome everyone to Arctic Panther Build Log Part 3. I have a couple major things to get done today. One is going to be to focus on some wiring. I got to get some sleeving done on the pump reservoir, and then I also have to fix at least one supplemental 4-pin CPU power cable from the power supply, and I've done a sleeve one of those. So I'm going to start off with some cable sleeving probably, and also of course going to start bending the tubes and hopefully get the loop filled up. But before I get to any of that, I have like a little pile of boxes back here, and I have some like accessories, some extra stuff that I've been collecting. Some of it I have gotten from vendors, but most of it has just been me impulse buying stuff on like performance PCs and Amazon. So I'm gonna go over a few of those things, but it's still in the boxes, so let's start by taking them out of the boxes. Oh yeah, and I also need to blame you guys for a lot of this stuff too, because a lot of this is some responses to stuff that you guys said in the comments for last video. But anyway, ignore most of the stuff on the right side up here. This is the power supply, which I'm going to be doing an unmasking of in just a few minutes. And then cable sleeving stuff, and then that's just a random stash of stuff I've been working with. Anyway though, starting from the top, Primo Flex, just some flexible tubing from Primo Chill, because I realized I didn't really have any of this, and when you need some flexible tubing and all you have is hardline stuff, it's nice to have some flex tubing. From Mayhem's, I have two things. This is the Blitz cleaning kit. Just nice to have that for cleaning out stuff if you need to do really thorough cleaning. It's a full system. I've never used it before, but I've read about it and stuff, and it does a really good job. So, and then also from Mayhem's, I have a pH testing kit, which may come in handy in the future. Impulse buys, yay, good to have. What's this doing here? This is for Nori. Hold on. Nori, what's this? Did that a new bone? Oh, good girl. Okay, come on here. Sit. Good girl. Sit pretty. Sit pretty. Good girl. There you go. Yeah. Okay, run away and make out with it. Hero's interested too. But Hero doesn't like chew toys. He doesn't really have many teeth to chew them with, so there it is. Anyway, I'm getting distracted. How can I not? Just look at her. Okay, back to the thing. Her old one is not doing very good. Moving along. This I already had. This is from XSPC, and it is just a cable chopper. That's what I'm going to call it. I'm going to call it the chopper. It's very sharp. I tested it out already. Does a really good job cutting the PETG really cleanly, so it helps speed things along. Alright, I got a set of micro files, needle files, I guess is what these are called. File a lot of this stuff under would have been convenient to have already, but now I have them, so there you go. Big old stack of sandpaper, because sandpapers, apparently I'm into sandpaper now. Got this kind of last minute. I wanted to have a temperature sensor, and I completely forgot to order one, so I needed to find something on Amazon that was going to get here quickly. So this is a G1/4 plug with 10K sensor, so the sensor is actually in the plug there, so I can just put that cap anywhere in the system that has water from the system up against it, and I'll be able to tell the temperature. And then the other side I can just plug into one of the thermal probe connection points on the motherboard. The box underneath is a 4TB WD hard drive, because I needed to have a $35 more order to get this to ship quickly, and 4TB hard drive, right? Alright, this was sent directly from Primo Chill. Let me see if I can swish it around. And this is a reaction to Jay's video on this, so thanks Primo Chill for sending this over. This is their View Fluid. It's still in development, but it looks really cool. It's got kind of that shampoo effect, so I'm gonna maybe test that out and see how it looks in there. Also it's a Primo Chill order, so it came with Sour Patch Kids. Okay, whoever saw my sander before, it wasn't a real sander. Now I have an actual sanding block. That should be convenient and very helpful. Got some tap magic stuff since I've been drilling into metal. Useful to have this for lubricating things and making sure it doesn't get too hot and keep getting a clean cut. I got some nitrile gloves. Since I've been complaining about getting fingerprints on things, I can wear the gloves now, and that's super helpful for a wide variety of things. I've been meaning to get those for quite some time. Come back to those in a second. I wanted a funnel, and they have G1/4 funnels. This one's from Coolant's, the liquid funnel with adapter, so it's got a G1/4 threading on the bottom, and it's kind of squishy. Smaller than I thought it was going to be, but it also comes with a little tube that you can feed down in there in order to let the air out, so if you don't have a place where air can escape, this can be very helpful while filling your loop. That's the idea, is that I'll just stick it right there, right? Screw it on there and be good to go. Pour the fluid right in. Now this I didn't buy. This I've had. It's my pin extractor, which I've used for modding my power supply over here, for example. But since these are delicate and they can break, and since I actually wanted the pin extractor for Molex, we just got a kit that comes with the Molex pin extractor, as well as pin extraction tools for several other types of plugs in the PC, including a replacement or a backup for my standard PCIe pin extraction tool right there, so that's nice to have. Speaking of pins, wow, these are standard Molex ATX PCIe power pins, the same type of pins that are used in pretty much all of the motherboard, EPS, and PCI Express power plugs. These are really expensive for some reason. I feel like I should go and buy these when I'm in Taiwan next time and get them really cheap. And anyway, I have a set of those now, so that's a backup in case I break a pin as I'm doing a bit of the modding here. Also, I didn't have one of these. I borrowed the one from Kyle last time. This is a crimping tool, so that when you're actually attaching these pins to the cables, use the crimping tool to crimp them in place, and that means that I can basically make any cable I want of any length I want and replace broken pins on the end and that kind of thing, so that should be really helpful. And finally, finishing out my tools, I got a center punch, which is very helpful for drilling into metal and starting out stuff. And then, okay, stepped drill bit set. Yay! So many people, as I was drilling the holes for the fill and drain ports on the Define R5 over there in the last video, were like, Paul, you need a step drill bit set, so, or at least a step drill bit. I got a full set. I can go up to all the way up to 1 3/8 inch, and they're like cobalt or something, and they come with this case that makes you feel like it's totally worth the money, because look, I mean, it's got a nice fancy case. Anyway, and that is all the stuff that I just bought kind of recently, so I'll post links to all this stuff down in the video's description if you are interested in any of them, and let's move on and start some cable sleeving. I'm attempting to harvest a 4-pin CPU connector from this old modular cable, and I'm not doing a very good job at it. Pretty much mangled this one and got a piece of it stuck inside, so I'm seeing if I can do the other one instead. So I want to get this power supply situation resolved, and here's my dilemma. I need another 4-pin supplemental CPU power connector, the ATX 12 volt as it's more commonly known. My problem is, for my outs on the back here, everything that's hardwired is hardwired. There's nothing else available there. I've got 2 of these white 8-pin outputs, and those are actually made for ATX 12 volts and PCIe. But what I did in the original build was I took my 2 PCI Express power cables for my graphics cards, because I have 2 of them, 2 8-pins coming that are hardwired, and then I have 2 more that I made the cables for here, and those are going to be using up those 2 plugs. So I have all my peripheral connectors here, and this is it's a big old power supply. It can handle the juice. It's got the juice that it needs, but it's got a single 12 volt rail too. So no matter what my 12 volt connectors are in here, I will be connecting to that 12 volt rail. Now, quick disclaimer, this is not meant to be a tutorial or anything like that, so please don't go poking around with your power supply wiring and circuitry unless you know at least a little bit what you're doing. Don't take my word for it. But basically what I did was I took one of my peripheral cables that I made last time, because I know I did it right the first time, these were functional, and I back traced the connectors here for the SATA connection points, because SATA has a 12 volt, 5 volt, and a 3.3 volt, and I traced that back to the actual 6-pin connectors for the peripherals on there. And I figured out, according to that, I've got 2 grounds, 3.3, 5 volt, and 12 volt, and I want that 12 volt, and I want 2 12 volts, and I'd rather not go splicing off of a single one, because kind of the point of the 18 gauge wires going to each 12 volt rails, each one can only support a certain amount of amperage, and you don't want to go over that, so splicing them isn't the best solution. So first, to answer question 1, because there are pins in all 6 of each of these slots there, yeah, there's pins in all of them. So mystery unused pin by any of the peripheral cables, what is that? If that's another 12 volt, maybe I can just connect up to that. So I've got my black lead connected to a ground. Power supply is now on because I've got it hot wired, and just to double check my chart, the top right should be 3.3 volts. 3.3 volts, good. The bottom left should be our 12 volt. Cool. 12.3. Can be a variance of about 5 plus or minus 5%. That's pretty standard. And then 5 volt should be bottom right. There we go. There's the 5 volt. And then bottom middle. That's a no. That's a no juice. That's probably just another ground, or it might just be a dummy not connected to anything. Because right now we're getting like 30. It's climbing. All right, this is getting beyond my knowledge of explaining that. But basically, I can't use that. I can't use that bottom extra connector. The upshot here is that I'm going to need to use 2 of these peripheral outs to go into my single 4-pin power connector, but that's okay. Now I have 3 peripheral cables that I made originally that I don't really need so much anymore. I only really need a Molex connector for the pump in there. So these I'm probably just going to set aside and save. I'll use some of the original cables that I still have salvage to pull the caps off of that, and then sleeving. Yes, alright. Sleeving cables, here goes. Alright, so I've made the weirdest 4-pin ATX CPU power plug ever. It goes into 2 of those peripheral cables into the power supply. On the power supply side, the plugs are reversed on each of these if you look at the colors, just because I wanted the plug on top, which you might be able to vaguely see through the top of the computer, to be alternating kind of like that, you know, so aesthetics of course. But 2 plugs on the power supply side, 4 pins on this side. Let's give a quick test. So the 2 top ones should be 12 volts and the 2 bottoms should be ground. 12 volts, yay. 12 volts again, yay. Let's try the other ground. Alright, 12 volts and 12 volts. Looks like we're good. And here is my completed sleeves cabling for my DDC pump, and this is the part I'm least enthusiastic about. I need some like wider gauge heat shrink because this was not wide enough. I tried to work it all the way up there to get to the end, but it gets wider there because I'd already put some other heat shrink down there, so that's as far as I got. It's not very clean right where it meets the pump, but that's going to be facing the back, so I'm okay with it. Also, this heat shrink comes out a little bit further than I would have wanted, but again, it's going to be hidden, so no big deal. I did 2 wires per sleeve to keep things just a little bit tighter. I went with all black mainly because like that's what I have the most of left over now. And then here's my 2 end plugs. I did replace the white caps that were on there before with black, and I used some heat shrink, stretched it out to go around the end of that one because that will be somewhat visible, plugged into the motherboard, and then the Molex plug on the other side, also replaced with a black cap. And again, some not the prettiest heat shrink done on there to cap things off, but hold things in place. And now I think I can finally install my power supply. Yay, power supply! Progress. So some last minute logistics before things get too crowded in there because I need to make sure everything's plugged in. I've got front panel connected already, USB and all that good stuff, as well as power reset. Now what I've got to worry about are fans. So I was going to have a bunch of these little splitters, or at least a few of these little splitters, but I ended up only needing 1. There's actually 7 fan headers on this motherboard, so 2 of them are right down here, and these 2 fans are plugged into that. 2 of them for the CPU in the top left. I'm going to plug those 2 into that. There are 3 in the lower right hand corner, so the 2 front fans are going to go into, well, 1 front fan is going to go in one of those, and then I'm going to do a splitter off one of those for this fan, as well as the bottom intake fan. That will leave 1 more, and that's a pump header fan down there, and that one's going to connect up to the PWM plug for the pump. I also realized I have my ROG SLI bridge here, which lights up, of course, and that has a separate little cable that comes off of it, and I completely lost track of that cable, and I thought that the entire build was going to be ruined, but fortunately I found it at the last minute, and it has a splitter in the end, so it doesn't actually eat up an entire RGB out on the motherboard, so I can plug it in and then also plug in an RGB strip to it. So get an RGB strip set up to be at least down here in the bottom, but there's also that digital RGB header. I don't have a digital RGB LED strip yet, but I am going to take the cable for that because there's a special cable for it that only has 3 pins. So I'm going to plug that in and have that wired up going to the back, so if I do get one of those digital RGB strips, I can plug it in and I won't have to worry about accessing the header on the motherboard. So once I get the RGB wires wired up through back there, which I'm going to start actually getting some glue gunning. Oh no, it's dripping. Oh, that's horrible. Damn it, glue gun. It's like boogers just got on my newly sleeved cables. That's not cool. Okay, sorry. So because this little plug right here in the cable comes off at a really weird kind of inconvenient spot aesthetically, I'm just gonna kind of fold it back here and use my glue gun to hold it in place. Hopefully. I'm sure this is standard operating procedure. Oh, that's too much. It's okay. I folded it. The threading inside the fill port is different than the threading. This is G1/4. This is just a thicker gauge threading for the fill port, so I can't use my fancy filler upper guy. Plan B. Had my first leak almost immediately. That will teach me to go forward without putting paper towels down in case of leaks, but it was the cap that I had on the reservoir pump right there, and although aesthetically pleasing, these black caps from EK should only really be used to cap off flat GM1/4 fittings, whereas this one's recessed, so it wasn't sealed right there and it started dripping down. I have paper towels ready now though, so let's continue. So, look at that. The flow indicator is flowing. So guys, I need to wrap up this video. This video has taken more like 3 days as far as the actual amount of work I've put into the build. Of course, a lot of that had to do with filming it and whatnot, and also overcoming obstacles and dilemmas. I've learned some special important things. I need to give a shout out to Richard, aka Darth Beavis. When it comes to bending this thicker stuff, the thicker 16mm PETG tubing, it's just a bit more challenging. You have to warm up a bit more of it and everything. And his video, and just actually watching him do it, just as far as how aggressive he is with getting the heat on there, as long as you're careful, of course, to avoid bubbles and everything, was super helpful. So thanks, Richard, for that video on that. I'll post a link to that one in the description. Beyond that, I did discover a new technique that I developed, or I have no idea if this is a normal technique or not, but it's basically that as I'm bending, when it's got the insert in there and everything, and it's warm, and I'm bending, and if it starts to bubble up or something like that, I was taking one of these soft cloths, basically just wrapping with it and like holding it. So I was like squeezing the bubble back down with my hand and then waiting for it to cool off a little bit. And I was actually able to salvage several pieces that way, which was useful, because when you're bending PETG tubing, it's a very fine line to go from this is an absolutely vital, integral part of my build that I must protect now at all costs, to this is a piece of scrap plastic that I'm now throwing away and I hate. This bend was what basically killed my evening last night, because I had everything set up. I got all the bends done, I had them all in place, I just didn't have the fitting caps on all of them. So I went to do that really quick last night, finish it up, and then I was going to pour some water in, because I promised you guys that I'd have water in it by the end of today's video. This was what I called my J-bend, and I had actually replaced it right down there. And it looked pretty cool when it was in there. It helped me not use quite as many fittings to get this vertical part right here. But when I attempted to actually put the cap on the end, just didn't want to go in there, and that's because this is part of the bend right there, and so the uniformity of the roundness of the tubing had been warped, and therefore the cap wouldn't go on. So I tried to salvage it, started sanding it down and whatnot, and eventually I was just like, I hate it now and it sucks, so I had to scrap that piece and go back to my original plan of using a few adapters on there. Now, I have water in it, as you guys can see. It's percolating, it's bubbling a little bit. You can hear the pump. This is a DDC pump. It's a good pump. DDC pumps make a little bit more noise than the D5, so I'm getting used to that. Beyond that though, was mostly leak free except for a little cap on the pump reservoir down there that I had to replace to get that to fit in there. Of course, this is just distilled water in there right now. I'm just going to let it run and do some leak testing and make sure there's no leaks. And then for part 3, I have lots of things still to do, of course. Several of you noticed that my cables need some training. I'm still in the process of doing that, and I still have more work to do there. But I needed to get water in this system. I can't do a part 3 of a water-cooled build and not actually have water in the system. So, good. Water in the system. But I guess when it comes down to it, my goal was really just to get water in the system for today's video, as I promised you guys. So, I've done that. I hope you guys are liking the look of it so far. I'm pretty stoked with it. I'm happy. I'm happy with what I got going on here so far. If you guys are happy too, if you think it's looking good, hit the thumbs up button on your way out, of course, and leave me a comment in the comment section. I've been getting a lot of feedback from you guys on this build, and it has been impacting my decisions in certain areas, so please keep that coming. Thanks again for watching this video, guys, and we'll see you next time.